China conducted a 2-day military exercise around Taiwan called Strait Thunder-2025A from April 1st to April 2nd. The exercise, announced only on its second day, drew attention due to several unusual operational choices. Observers noted multiple apparent inconsistencies, prompting debate about the overall effectiveness and strategic intent of the drills. The H-6 bombers carried the wrong missiles. In this drill, China deployed its H-6K bombers for the first time. Video footage show the bombers carrying two missiles, likely YJ-21 anti-ship missiles specifically designed to target ships. However, Chinese media stated the mission was an airstrike aimed at land targets on Taiwan's eastern coast, such as Hualien, Chashan Air Base, or radar stations in Taichung. Such targets are usually attacked using CJ-10 cruise missiles, which fly close to the ground with precision and a 2,000-kilometer range. Instead, China used the YJ-21, a mismatch for land-based attacks. Although a hypersonic anti-ship missile like the YJ-21 can still cause damage when hitting land, its radar guidance system is designed to track ships, not stationary buildings. It would be far less effective and far more expensive than a CJ-10, costing several $million per missile. Some observers joke that perhaps China hurriedly grabbed the wrong missile because the correct ones were unavailable. The fighter jets assigned to escort duties carried a maximum of 4 air-to-air missiles, which is considered relatively weak. China's main escort fighter, the J-16, has a combat range of approximately 3,000 kilometers. After flying to eastern Taiwan equipped with 2 external fuel tanks, these aircraft would have already consumed about half their fuel, driving pilots to worry about making it back. Other fighters, like the J-10 and J-11, with ranges of about 2,000 kilometers, will likely only manage a one-way trip. It later emerged that the final leg of the escort was conducted by J-15 fighters from China's aircraft carrier, the Shandong. Due to limitations of the carrier's ski jump deck, J-15 fighters are heavily restricted in payload capacity. Often they carry more fuel than weapons, with pilots constantly calculating remaining fuel mid-flight. Despite these limitations, China made extensive efforts to deploy fighters halfway around Taiwan just to drop 2 YJ-21 missiles, suggesting poor operational planning. In real combat, whether the aging H-6 bombers could safely cross the Bashi Channel is questionable. The H-6, based on the Soviet Tu-16 bomber from the 1950s, has a maximum speed of around 900 km per hour and lacks defensive capabilities. In an actual conflict, Taiwan's F-16B fighters equipped with AIM-120 missiles with a 150-kilometer range could easily intercept them. On top of that, U.S. forces based at Kadena Air Base in Japan could deploy F-35 stealth fighters capable of destroying the H-6 bombers long before they reached Taiwan's east coast. China's Air Force slept while the carrier Shandong crossed the strait unprotected. Despite China's dramatic claims that the Strait Thunder-2025A drill described how the Shandong carrier group and the H-6K bombers coordinated strikes through the Bashi Channel to simulate attacks on eastern Taiwan, the actual exercise revealed serious shortcomings. The coordination between air and naval forces appeared ineffective, leaving the Shandong carrier essentially unprotected. The scenario didn't align realistically with combat conditions. The Shandong carrier group quietly passed through the Bashi Channel between midnight of March 31st and early morning, April 1st, eventually arriving approximately 220 nautical miles southeast of Taiwan. The escort fleet appeared impressive, including a Type 055 destroyer, a Type 052D guided missile destroyer, a Type 054A frigate, and a supply ship. But no air protection was seen accompanying the significant fleet movement. Taiwan's military confirmed the showing radar evidence of 19 Chinese naval vessels near Taiwan between 6 a.m. March 31st and 6 a.m. April 1st. While the sea was busy, the skies remained notably empty. Typically, Chinese warplanes frequently operate around Taiwan's southwest airspace. J-16 fighters with ranges over 3,000 kilometers and J-10 fighters with around 2,000 kilometers regularly approach the Bashi Channel. Yet during this crucial joint exercise, the Chinese Air Force notably failed to appear, leaving the Shandong carrier group entirely on its own. Military analysts suggest that the Chinese Air Force may not be comfortable conducting nighttime operations, potentially fearing accidents or radar issues. With the exercise regarded by some as merely a political display, commanders may have prioritized safety over operational realism. Thus, the Navy maintained a presence at sea while the Air Force chose to remain inactive, turning the drill into little more than a symbolic gesture. Also, the Shandong carrier did not launch J-15 fighters, nor did it deploy drones or early warning aircrafts. Analysts believe the carrier purposely chose the nighttime passage through the Bashi Channel to minimize attention. Launching and landing aircraft on the carrier's ski jump deck is challenging enough in daytime. Night operations with rough sea conditions would have posed significant extra risk, prompting the decision not to deploy aircraft at all. In reality, the coordination between China's Air Force and Navy, as described by Chinese official media, does not exist. Different military branches and regional commands typically operate separately. Such a lack of coordination in actual combat could have serious consequences. The Bashi Channel would pose a significant risk for Chinese naval forces. To the north lies Taiwan, and to the south are the Bataan Islands of the Philippines, both potentially equipped with anti-ship missiles. Taiwan's Sunfeng 3 missiles has a 400-kilometer range and can penetrate ship decks. Taiwan's F-16V fighters, armed with AIM-120 missiles with a 150-kilometer range, could quickly engage. The Philippines is also acquiring F-16 fighters, increasing the threat from the south. Furthermore, the US military could deploy F-35 stealth fighters carrying LRASM missiles with a 1,000-kilometer range from Guam, Palau, or the Philippines. Under these conditions, China's Shandong carrier group would face severe threats from multiple directions. The Shandong aircraft carrier has been effectively relegated to supporting H-6 bombers. During the Strait Thunder-2025A exercise, China stated that H-6K bombers simulated attacks on eastern Taiwan. The Eastern Theater Command Air Force did not provide sufficient air support for either the Shandong carrier or its own H-6 bombers. As a result, J-15 fighters from the Shandong carrier had to handle the task providing escort for the H-6 bombers during simulated bombing missions on April 2nd. This situation has drawn attention as it's unusual for carrier-based fighters to primarily serve as escort for bombers. According to Taiwan Defense Ministry, only 13 Chinese aircrafts entered the area near Taiwan Eastern region from the north and south on April 2nd. This number was significantly lower than the 30 flights that approached from the front side of the Taiwan Strait. It appears the Eastern Theater Command provided minimal fighters escort at the north and the south, while Shandong J-15 fighters conducted 16 sorties, indicating greater activity from the carrier-based aircraft. Since simulated bombing by the H-6 was a crucial element of the exercise, the Shandong carrier had to step in to compensate for the lack of Air Force escorts from the Eastern Theater Command. But the J-15 fighters from the Shandong carrier also face significant limitations. Due to the ski jump deck, these fighters are limited to a maximum takeoff weight of about 26 tons. Fully loaded with two 500-kilogram bombs, their combat range is around 1,000 kilometers, significantly reducing their operational effectiveness. Escort missions require constant attention to fuel levels, often forcing pilots to return early to refuel. Imagining the scenario is unusual. J-15 fighters escorting H-6 bombers might have had to turn back halfway through the mission as their fuel warning lights flashed. The bombers would then find themselves unexpectedly flying without escorts. Military experts suggest that the Eastern Theater Command may not have intended to provide full escort coverage from the outset. The escort H-6 bombers effectively to eastern Taiwan, China would need J-16 fighters. But the J-16's 3,000-kilometer range would not be sufficient for a round-trip mission without aerial refueling. Experts speculate that aerial refueling operations might have been impractical due to rough seas or technical issues that day, causing commanders to ultimately cancel sending fighters to escort the bombers. The lack of sufficient air support from the Eastern Theater Command undermined the exercise's effectiveness. Consequently, the Shandong carrier ended up providing direct support to H-6 bombers rather than conducting typical carrier operations. Air combat simulations also appeared disorganized. In terms of air combat deployments, the planning was noticeably inconsistent. While China stated that the H-6K bombers would target eastern Taiwan, logically they should have approached via northern or southwestern airspace. The north would be strategic for attacking Taipei or supporting naval forces, and the southwest critical for protecting the Bashi Channel from US F-35 interventions. These areas should typically have heavy fighters deployment, including large numbers of J-16s and J-10s. Instead, the Eastern Theater Command concentrated its aircraft in the central area of the Taiwan Strait, not aligned with realistic combat scenarios. According to Taiwan's defense ministry, China conducted a total of 135 flights around Taiwan on April 1st and 2nd, with 67 flights concentrated in the central Taiwan Strait. By comparison, northern, southwestern, and southeastern regions combined accounted for only 38 flights. Despite the stated objectives of simulating bombing missions by HK-6 bombers targeting eastern Taiwan, such as the Cha-Shan Air Base or the Taitun radar station, few aircraft were deployed to effectively protect to clear routes from the north to southwest. The central Taiwan Strait area is known to be heavily defended with advanced missile systems such as Taiwan's Skybow 3 and Patriot PAC-3, which have ranges of approximately 130 kilometers and 120 kilometers respectively. Fighter jets in this area would face considerable danger from missile threats, making it generally avoided by combat aircraft during real conflicts. Thus, the concentration of 67 flights in this high-risk zone appeared unusual. Observers suggest two possible explanations for this deployment pattern. First, an attempt to intimidate Taiwan by demonstrating presence and activity. Second, fulfilling internal administrative requirements by creating visually impressive scenes. Either way, analysts indicate this approach does not reflect realistic combat strategies. Is the Eastern Theater Command really in charge? Chinese state media claimed that the Strait Thunder-2025A exercise was led by the Eastern Theater Command. The Shandong aircraft carrier, which belongs to the Southern Theater Navy, was said to have coordinated with air and naval forces in the east to conduct joint operations and establish regional air superiority. But this narrative has raised doubts. The Shandong is considered a key asset of the Southern Theater, and its movements into the Pacific are unlikely to be directed by the Eastern Command. Instead, such operations would typically be coordinated by the Central Military Commission or Navy headquarters in Beijing. In that case, the Eastern Theater Command would play only a supportive role. Under the current Chinese military structure, command authority is clearly centralized. The Shandong falls under the jurisdiction of the Navy headquarters in Beijing and ultimately reports to the Central Military Commission. While service branches operate within their theater boundaries, they report to their respective service headquarters in peacetime. For example, both the Navy under the Southern Command and the Air Force under the Eastern Command follow orders from higher up, not the theater itself. The same applies to strategic forces such as the rocket force and electronic warfare units, which are beyond theater control. China's 2016 military reform dismantled the previous 7 military regions and shifted power directly to the Central Military Commission. This exercise appears to be coordinated at the top level, making the claim of unified command by the Eastern Theater misleading. Why would Beijing promote this narrative? There may be two possible reasons. First, presenting the drill as led by a regional command lower the profile of the operation, distancing it from direct involvement by top leadership. Second, it could be an attempt to counter recent rumors surrounding Eastern Theater Command Lin Xiangyang. Reports have speculated about his political standing, and emphasizing the theater's readiness could be aimed at silencing speculations. The performance of China's theater command structure in this exercise has exposed a key weakness. Analysts argue that in real conflict, China's Central Military Commission would be unlikely to hand over command authority to a regional unit. These inconsistencies suggest a lack of coordination in messaging and planning. Rocket launchers joined the scene, targeting fish or empty waters. Chinese media added another element to the exercise, claiming that the Eastern Theater Army used rocket launchers in the East China Sea to simulate precision strikes on key targets in Taiwan, such as ports and energy infrastructure. However, experts point out major inconsistencies with this claim. Take the PHL-03 rocket launcher, for example. Its maximum range is roughly 150 kilometers, with upgraded versions reaching up to 300 kilometers. These systems are not suited for low-range or precision attacks. Their accuracy is limited, and in actual drills, they are usually deployed along the Fujian coast close to Taiwan, where their range is more effective, such as from Pingtan Island, just 110 kilometers from Hsinchu, or areas near Xiamen and Quanzhou. But this time, China claimed the launch took place in the East China Sea. That region is entirely maritime and lies more than 400 kilometers from Taiwan. At that distance, the rocket system would not be able to reach any land-based targets. Footage shown in Chinese official videos depicted explosion kicking up clouds of dust on land, creating the appearance of a successful strike. This has raised questions about where the rocket was actually fired from and whether the scenes were staged on a temporary platform or edited using old footage. Taiwan's Ministry of Defense has said it observed no such live fire drills, further casting doubt on the authenticity of China's claims. Observers stated that this part of the exercise showed little effort to conceal inconsistencies. The video also briefly showed rocket force units posing for the camera, but no missile launches were recorded. Rocket launchers were lined up, smoke machines were activated, and dust was added, possibly from earlier footage repurposed for the current drill. Analysts described this segment as highly performative with minimal real activity. Even basic prop appear to be simulated. Taiwan's military has largely dismissed this segment, noting that even if the objective was symbolic, the execution lacked credibility. Overall, the exercise appeared hastily organized. The narrative relied heavily on video editing, which exposed numerous flaws. The Shandong aircraft carrier was accompanied by a supply ship and operated in the Pacific for 2 days. It returned to the South China Sea via the Bashi Channel on April 2nd. The supply ship followed closely, serving as logistical support. The short duration and rapid turnaround suggest the operation was more symbolic than operational, likely fulfilling a political assignment rather than testing combat readiness. What was promoted as a live-fire military exercise now appears more like a scripted production. Analysts say the operation resembled a staged performance rather than a combat drill, lacking coordination, realism, and transparency.